Hey, y'all. Chase Thomas Podcast is back. The full ride here on this Wednesday night edition of the full ride here on the Chase Thomas Podcast. I like to repeat myself because, the folks miss it the first time. You gotta bring it back. But fellow University of North Georgia alumni, Matt Green is in the house. We're on youtube.com. Just check out Chase Thomas Podcast and you can see some mighty fine authentic goods, outsider merch, the home team, along with some great Atlanta Braves merch behind us. We got the banner on both sides. There's some nasty red and black stuff on the other side of you, but you do have a University of North Georgia hoodie. If I'd known you were going to wear this, I would have gotten the old crew neck out,
for sure,
and we could have matched. Yeah, I'll bring it next week.
It was almost embarrassing how easy it was to find. Like, it couldn't have been more front and center hanging up in my closet. I'm like, I swear I've looked for this thing, but I was worried it was lost, but yeah, so I decided to rep the alumni. Alum.
I think we're.
I don't know the correct verbiage.
Well, in that sentence, I think I guess it would be.
That would be rep my alma mater.
Yeah, that would be alma mater.
Yeah, there you go.
We are both alumni, and I am an alum, and you are an alum. I think that's how it all works.
What is alumnus? When does that get used? I don't know.
I think that's just like kind of hoity-toity to me, right?
It feels like it.
Like someone who says I'm an alumnus of so-and-so. That's like someone who, if I'm an alumnus, that means I'm an alumnus from like Harvard. I don't think that's something you say. I'm like an alumnus from Nebraska. It's a little weird no offense to the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, but I don't know. I feel like that's a weird way of phrasing it if that's the case. But is that the only North Georgia merch that you got? What else do you got? Because we saw before we got started, Tori's got the Still Undefeated t-shirt.
I also have the one. I have two versions of it, actually. The one that University was spelled wrong. Did you ever see that one?
No.
It's like a circle. It's a cool shirt. That's why I got it. It's like a circle, and it's got that, like, it's just gray. The logo's blue, and it's got that, like, that modern Nighthawk logo kind of.
Okay.
It says, like, University of North Georgia, like, in a circle around it. But they misspelled it. Like, I think they swapped, like, where the T and the I are or something. And so I have both shirts because one kid was in one of my like, broadcast classes, and he was like looking at my shirt, and he's like, it's spelled wrong. So we like did like a story on it for like our broadcast, or like had footage of like the shirt being spelled wrong, and got like a whole thing about it. It's the hard-hitting journalism,
Was I still there at the time, or was I gone?
No.
Or was this before me?
That'd have been after you, yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say, was this BC or AC? I don't know.
Sheila Conti's class. She was a good one.
I never had her. I don't know who that is. She must have came in after I was gone.
Yeah, she was in after. She worked at like CNN and stuff.
Okay. No progress on the Nesbitt renaming front. I can report to this point, Matt Green, but we're working on it as this podcast continues to grow here on the Chase Thomas Podcast. But again, just go ahead and subscribe where you can see Matt and myself here on the full ride on YouTube. So just go look it up, Chase Thomas Podcast YouTube, and subscribe today. Matt, what's been going on? How was your week? How have things been since the last time we spoke? We saw Maddox hop up there. He's gained another 50 pounds since I last saw him. It's a big dog these days.
How dare you, sir? He's big, but he's still nice and toit. Toit like a tiger. I've been good. This is like the worst time of the year for sports, I've discovered. Like, not just discovered, but
you think it's worse in the summer?
I guess I'm just a big baseball fan. Summer, I guess you have summer, so it's like that's like another thing you can do. Like winter, we're all just like cooped up in our houses, are cold and miserable. The NFL's off for like 2 weeks, and we're all just waiting on one game anyway. It's like the Super Bowl. As cool as the Super Bowl is, it's just one game. It's not as cool as just like any normal NFL weekend where you have like 8 games going on,
Yeah.
But it's like a cool thing. Obviously, it's a big game, decide who the best team is. But it's like now is when I'm getting into like, okay, I guess like this NBA season, it's just, I feel like I can't get excited about the NBA right now. It's just so many players out for various reasons. It's kind of college basketball I'm trying to get into. It's like, because it's that time of the year, all the football is over. I don't know. It's just, it feels like such a boring sports time of the year.
I don't know. I like it for me. I mean, I'm obviously a big NBA guy and I watch a lot of college hoops too, but I mean, I'm excited for college baseball to be back. It's back in less than a week or a little over a week, Matt Green. Like, I know you being a fan of a school that's not about all sports, but here at the University of
Hey,
Tennessee,
Georgia's
Knoxville.
ranked, man. They're like
Hmm.
preseason ranked, so they're respectable.
Well, no,
Maybe
I'm
higher
saying
than Tennessee, right?
I think you're like one spot ahead of us as of right now,
Thought you
but
guys are
it's
supposed to be a baseball school. What's going on?
we're not a baseball school. We're a hashtag everything school. That is what we are. Rowing, women's
Everything but
basketball, men's basketball.
football.
Well, we'll get into football because that's back. Like, I tweeted about it this morning. Like, do you know how you want to start your morning, Matt Green? You want to start your morning on Rocky Top. Can't go wrong there. But you also want to start your morning on ESPN.com, where you can see Bill Connelly's latest S&P Plus projections. Who I have his football study hall book right over there on the bookshelf, and I'm a longtime fan of Bill, and he does great work. And just seeing Tennessee Vols in the top 10 for 2022 is just I was not well, Matt. I was like, oh, this is happening. The numbers don't lie, and the numbers bear it out. Like the proof is in the pudding. I don't know how many other examples I can say here, but I'm excited, and we'll get into the S&P Plus. Actually, you know what? Let's just do that now. Let's hit the S&P Plus projections now, Matt Green, because for the folks that have not checked it out, just hit up ESPN.com. You'll find the link to all 131 rankings. Pretty fascinating. It's not like a set in stone where like this is how it's going to go, and things might change with more portal stuff, injuries, obviously a thing. But I thought this was pretty fascinating, and it's not like there's a bunch of stuff on there that you have to really hate unless you're like a Wake Forest fan and you're like still no respect because the numbers do not like Wake Forest in this one. But Tennessee coming in just behind your Georgia Bulldogs at number 2 and the Ohio State Buckeyes at number 1 in offensive S&P Plus projections for 2022. That is big time. And if this defense was not 42nd or something in defensive S&P Plus, Tennessee's like they're a top. I mean, they're flirting with the top 5 at that point because the offense isn't getting any worse. But if you get that defense in the top 25, sir, I'm not saying Kirby's shaking, but I'm also not saying Kirby shake it down there.
Well, we know how important the offensive side of the ball is too in college football. So like if they do say have like by whatever metric, it's so hard to measure what metric. Is it total yards? Is it points allowed? There's a lot of different ways to measure defense, but by whatever metric you determine if they do truly have the 42nd best defense in college football and they do have a top 5 offense, like that Tennessee team is going to be dangerous, So that's a reasonable thing to expect from them this year. And I think, especially with everything going on in the East, like Tennessee should definitely should have their sights on being the second best team in the East this year. What I was more shocked by, like, did this surprise you to see Georgia at 2 in offensive SP plus and see Alabama?
I mean, the offense was explosive. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's probably just because, I mean, they still have the uncertainty at running back. They're replacing a lot of production at wide receiver still. I mean, number 4 is not anything to scoff at, but it's not like it's just a slam dunk.
Just seeing Georgia above Alabama, I feel like was surprising.
I don't know. I think that I don't know. It's not enough that it's a disparity that I'm like, wow. It's not like a number 2 and number 11 or something. Yeah. Like number 2, number 4. It's not a lot, and I'm sure the numbers, if you get down into the nitty gritty, that it's not all that different. But who else jumped out to you? Because for me, I mean, Tennessee being in the top 10, obviously, we cannot emphasize that enough. So if you were so all the transfer kids or kids who are unhappy at their school right now, and you're listening to this very podcast, just remember Tennessee retains their defensive back coaches. Like that's something that's important. Willie Martinez stays on the staff here in Knoxville.
Willie Martinez.
That cannot be said about certain schools down there in Athens, which we'll get to. And I'll ask you about which one should, or who Tennessee should really focus on, who Coach Willie should focus on pulling out of the portal in the coming days out of Athens. A lot of talent in that defensive backfield. So I'm excited to see what Tennessee's able to drum up there. But
anywho. But yeah, and in terms of what your original question was before you went on and on about whatever that was, Mississippi State was the team that surprised me at 12 because I don't know. I'm just not too high with what the SEC West looks like. Like, obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty in the West, but I don't see Mississippi State being that team that rises up like amid the uncertainty. Like, I see like A&M should be probably the second best team, and what are they? They're 5, 6 in here. And then I don't. Do you think Mississippi State's the third best team in the West? Like you have LSU, you have Arkansas. Like,
well, I don't think LSU is going to be there yet. Well, I think it's partly because Mississippi State brings back a lot of talent. Will Rogers is still back. It's year 3 with Leach. There's the familiarity there with the air raid. They're going to beat some teams they shouldn't beat. That's just what Mississippi State does under Mike Leach year over year. So Auburn's in disarray, and we'll get into Auburn in a second, and that changes by the hour, which is just phenomenal content. But
I don't refreshing. Like, as we're starting, I'm like, he's still got his job, right? But
the report today on them changing the rule. Did you see that? The document that got added today on the Auburn website that Bud Elliott tweeted out?
What's that?
Oh, you've got to look at that while I'm breaking this down. Just look up Bud Elliott's timeline.
All right, I'll try to check that out.
But yeah, just Auburn's an absolute mess at the moment. So when you look at Auburn, you look at Ole Miss having to replace Matt Corral. That's a big what if. Like, Jackson Dart should be a great player right away for them, but still a wait and see a little bit. They lost Jeff Lebby to Oklahoma. We'll see what that does for this offense. They also lost to DC, and I think Lane's brother, who was the Kansas City, or what is he, the Kansas City Chiefs linebacker coach or something? Chris Kiffin. So he moves to coach with his brother as a co-DC in Oxford. But I don't know. When you look up and down, like, LSU's not there yet. Like, Kelly will get them there, obviously. But there is kind of an opening. Like, unless you're like my number 2 in this division, I think is still Arkansas. Like, Texas A&M has to prove to me that they're above Arkansas next year. Like, Arkansas cleaned up in the portal. They're bringing back, like, they have to replace a lot of wide receiver production, and that's headlined by Treylon Burks being out of there. But they got backs galore. The offensive line's good. They've cleaned up in the portal. They've got KJ Jefferson, a veteran quarterback. They kept their coordinators, like Barry Odom and Kendall Briles stayed put. I don't know. I think Arkansas is the second best team in the West right now, which is kind of, amazing. And Sam Pittman deserves all the praise in the world for that. But I could see Mississippi State sneaking into that 2-3 spot next year. I think the fact that I'm that high on Arkansas. I don't know. Like, is A&M's offense going to be better?
Arkansas is down there at 28 too.
That surprises me because I'm pretty high on Arkansas going into next year. I'm higher on them than maybe most are.
And I think that's why people, want this SEC bias, and they're like, oh, every year we got 8 teams in the top 25 of SEC. It's because, like, this is guys trying to rank who the best teams actually are. And
yeah,
at the end of the day, these teams are ranked based on their records, and there's not going to be 5 teams in the SEC West that have a 9-3 or better record. That's just not how it works. Someone has to lose these games, and someone has to go 6-6. Someone has to have a losing record. Like, so this, I think, it tries to show however well you can really, calculate this offensive and defensive efficiency that Bill Connelly tries to do. It's definitely interesting to look at and see Kentucky up there even in the top 20. Like,
Clemson at 5 kind of stood out to me because, like, he's projecting them to have the best defense in college football next year, which very much might happen. But that offense, and I don't know.
Definitely statistically too, if you're thinking about the competition. But I think that Clemson, like, we've seen how they recruit. Like, there's some big time dudes that got injured last year too.
I don't know. 41 offense, like, that's a big gamble because I don't know if that offense is fixed, and they didn't go outside the Clemson family on either recruiting hires. So I don't know. Like, Clemson's a huge wild card to me, but like you said, being the ACC, that should pay dividends for them. But I'll say it warmed my heart to see the South Carolina Gamecocks down there at 49th behind Oregon State. So the South Carolina fans, man. Let's go ahead and pump the brakes because the Florida Gators up there at 18. You've got Kentucky ahead of them, and then you got Missouri all the way down here at 54th, and they just lost Steve Wilkes, their DC, to the Carolina Panthers earlier today. But man, I'm telling you, like, the Kool-Aid that people have been drinking about this South Carolina Gamecocks team in 2022 just seeing my Tennessee Volunteers up there in the top 10 and then seeing the Mizzou Tigers and Kentucky
How about
being behind us.
LSU down there at 45 too?
I think it's because LSU's an unknown. Like they don't have a tight end at the moment, which is a problem. So they missed out on the portal. Remember the dude that Brian Kelly was dancing with, the latest one with the crate? He didn't even get him. Like that was a 5-star kid who ended up not even going to. I think he chose Bama, right?
I think so. Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of embarrassment, but I don't think they're there yet. It's going to take some time for Swag Kelly down there in the Bayou, but ultimately, I think that stood up. I think we got some time on that one. If you're a fan of like, let me throw a team like Northwestern, you're like, are we in for another bad year? If you're a fan of, let's throw this one out here, Colorado at 102.
Does Northwestern ever approach a season that way? Like,
well, I mean,
they're just happy that Pat Fitzgerald's still there. They're just,
I guess, but
hey, maybe it'll be a good year. Maybe it won't be. Oh well.
Carl Durrell and Jeff Collins. I hope you're renting because the numbers do not favor what kind of season you're going to have, and you're kind of in win now mode for both those programs. So I don't think those two gold domed schools are on the precipice of greatness in 2022. But it's just another perspective from a really, really smart college football mind. So go check that out, Bill Connelly on ESPN.com, because I thought it was great and really illuminating. And that's not just because I'm biased to see the Tennessee Volunteers in there in the top 10. Matt Green, let's hit on the Bryan Harsin stuff. So this story is ever changing. It's something that I cannot believe is still happening. I don't like after this podcast goes up tomorrow morning, like what the state will be for Auburn. Bryan Harsin might get relieved of his duties tonight. He might get relieved of his duties while he's here. He might get a contract extension while we're recording this podcast. I don't really know what's happening here. This is all insane to me, what's happening at Auburn, and it's all playing out publicly, which is not what you want. There's a huge disconnect between the boosters and the AD who's walking out, the president who's walking out. Like there is just, no one knows who's running Auburn right now, which is never a good sign. But I also can't talk too much about that because Tennessee has suffered from the same sort of dysfunction in the past of like who's actually running the University of Tennessee athletics department. And, I think this is pretty wild. But like, here's an excerpt from like, Bryan Harsin was clearly never going to work at Auburn. So let me pull this from ESPN.com from a couple days ago. Really good piece. It was the multitude. It was like Thamel and a couple other ESPN college football writers who all worked on this particular piece. Quote, in May, he skipped the 1985 Heisman Trophy winner Bo Jackson's charity golf tournament, leaving 2 assistants to speak in his absence, which peeved several big donors. Seems like a bad move when you're a first-year coach at Auburn to not go to Bo Jackson's charity golf tournament. That might be one you don't skip.
Why would you?
I mean, just what are you doing? This is like a basic one. And this one also stood out to me. Quote, this past week, he skipped an event hosted by the Georgia Athletic Coaches Association in Macon, where state championship winning high school coaches were honored. Georgia's Kirby Smart, Tennessee's Josh Heupel, Florida State's Mike Norvell, and South Carolina's Shane Beamer were among the head coaches who attended. Guess who wasn't there? Bryan Harsin. What does he do? Is he trying to get fired? Like he hasn't like gotten involved. Like he has just been an outsider and has made no effort to seemingly made no effort to be part of the Auburn SEC coach family. Like for better or worse, like what did you think this job was? Like how did you think they was going to play you skipping Bo Jackson's charity golf tournament? Like why are you skipping the GHSA like events where Kirby and every other big Southern coach is at? Like, what are you doing? Like, are you intentionally trying to sabotage yourself? I don't know. This piece on ESPN was just wild. And like, he's been an arduous, like, we're not going to cheat stuff, which is good. But like, okay, well, you also recruited like crap this first cycle. So, man, I would not be surprised if Kevin Steele is the head coach of the Auburn Tigers by Friday. Like nothing would surprise me, but this man, his actions, it seems like he has had no interest in being the long-term coach at Auburn University. This story just gets crazier and crazier, man.
Can we just talk about the fact this man was on vacation?
Yeah.
I
I
don't
think he's
know.
still on vacation. Is he back? I don't think he's back.
I think they said he came back from vacation today.
Okay.
But I don't know. For some reason, that just made the story even funnier to me. Just like I imagine him and like I think
I
I
think
don't
he's
know
in
if it was
Mexico.
yeah, that's where it was, right? I just imagine
Mm,
like Cayman Islands or something. But
mm.
yeah, somewhere in the Caribbean, right? And just like just being just bombarded with notifications and everything like that. Like I don't know. That's just funny to me.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know what Auburn is going to do. I heard Chuck Oliver talking about it on 680, and he's an Auburn guy, and
Mm.
he made it sound like basically the big time donors who basically run Auburn didn't get their way with the Bryan Harsin hire, and
Mm.
now they're like instead of throwing him a lifeline, they're like letting it get as bad as it can possibly get. Like they're essentially letting him drown. It's kind of how Chuck Oliver made it sound. So I don't know what's going to happen, like what that means exactly, because at this point Auburn looks bad to go down and hire a coach right now. So does that just mean whatever? He's lost all credibility with the donors and everybody, but we're just going to let him go out there and coach this team the whole season and then just have a plan for who we're going to get after next season. Like if you hire a coach right now, I don't know, that almost feels worse. Like you're not going to get the coach you want to get right now. Like that, all those guys,
Well, I mean, if you're Bill
they've made their
Clark, you take that,
decision.
right? Like if you're Bill Clark, you take this job.
Yeah, for sure. And that would be a good person without a doubt to get, but I don't know. I wonder if Bill Clark was going to go somewhere, like it would have already happened through this cycle. Like this cycle kind of seems over. I mean, granted, there's still an NFL game to be played, so we've seen like we're going to talk about like Georgia's coach going to Miami. There's obviously still some shaking in the coaching carousel to happen. But it feels really late in the process to hire a head coach and think that this is going to be a good like long-term hire.
Well, I mean, you don't really have a choice. Like the fact that it's played out publicly like this, like if you're Bryan Harsin, like your days are numbered anyway. Like the donors don't want you. The fans now are split. They're just like, this dude's not an Auburn guy. Like there's just no reason to keep this going. Like once the dam breaks like this, I think you just kind of have to eat. You just have to eat it and be like, wow, we are screwed for next year. Like we're just screwed. Like we messed up here. But also, I just wonder like what the vetting was like. Where hey Brian, you're gonna have to play the SEC game. Like you can't bring the Boise stuff here. Like that's just not gonna play in Alabama. Like I just imagine him just thinking that he could just be the Boise coach. He could just
Yeah, I think the only way that works is if a guy is just like so strong in what he does. He's like so different, like an Urban Meyer. Like that stuff's not going to work and come down to the SEC. But he was just such a confident coach in his abilities and everything. It seemed like obviously we know how it played out, and Florida was great under Urban Meyer. But like Harsin, like what is he? What is Boise State's identity? Like just being like good hard-nosed football. Like
yeah.
it's not necessarily like the old school BYU, even like run and gun type stuff. Why am I blanking on that old school head coach's name? You know who I'm talking about, like the legendary coach. The stadium's named after him.
Oh,
Lavelle Edwards.
yes.
Like those days or something. It's not like it's like coming with like some kind of huge track record. Like even a Mike Leach. Like he's just kind of like Boise State's just a solid program, but there's nothing they really did that was anything special. So you're going to come to Auburn, you have to be a part of the culture. Like you have to do something, and he doesn't. As we're from 15,000 feet or whatever the expression is. So we don't know exactly what's going on inside the locker room and everything. But and you hear about the player transferring and had a bunch of bad things to say, them being treated like dogs or whatever. It's also a player that's transferring. That's not necessarily a guy. Like transfers don't always speak the most fondly of a program. Like things didn't go well for him at Auburn, right? So I kind of take that with a grain of salt, but just the optics, the PR right now, it couldn't be any worse for Auburn.
What do you think ultimately happens late on February 9th, Matt Green? How do you see this playing out? Do you think Bryan Harsin keeps his job, or do you think Auburn fires him? I think I'll tell you what I think, and then you can. I think he gets fired with cause, and it's an absolute mess, and it doesn't work out that way. And then
Before the season starts?
Yeah, I think it's like this weekend. I don't think. Yeah, I think this is over. Like, you cannot drag this on. You cannot have spring practice and have like a spring game in a couple months with this man. Like, that's not how. Auburn is just, the SEC is a different beast. Like, once the tide has turned on somebody, like, it's over. Like, you have to change gears. You just have to be like, wow, he's been rejected. This is awful, and the donors won. So now you have to pivot back to what the donors want. And I mean, it's time. Kevin Steele, your next payday, my friend. Let's bring him back to the SEC.
Hey, if they just need a guy for a year,
Ed Orgeron.
You beat me to it, man. That's the interim.
That would be amazing.
And then they're going to be like, after one season, like, you know what? We kind of like this guy. We like his vibe. He's not scared of Saban. But no, that would be
Ed Orgeron at Auburn would be hilarious for a 1-year contract.
Hugh Freeze. When's Hugh Freeze just going to get the job? Like, we've been talking about Hugh Freeze to Auburn for like 5 years now. Like, it's got to happen at some point.
Well, what do you think happens? Do you think he loses it? What's your prediction? Your official prediction here on the Full Ride?
Oh man, you're making me worry saying he's going to get fired this week. But I tend to feel like he's going to be the coach this season.
Okay.
Like, this might seem bad from the outside, but I don't know. We'll see what happens. It's hard to fire someone in the middle of February. So we'll see. But yeah, if I had to go on record, I'm saying he's the coach in 2022. Start the season at least.
Okay. I like it. I love that. So the good friends over there at On3, partners with Outsider. Check the lid, but go subscribe to On3 if you've not already done so. They compiled all the coordinator changes this cycle. Matt, this is preposterous. There have been so many changes, man. Like, I knew there were a lot, and then I looked through this, and I was just, I just cannot believe how many there were. There were 29 coaching changes in the FBS ranks this cycle. That's insane. In this cycle, 62 FBS coaches, that's 48% of the 130, have changed offensive coordinators, including 11 of the 14 in the 8. 11 of 14 coaches in the ACC changed OCs this offseason. 9 in the CUSA, 7 in the AAC. There have been 54 defensive coordinator changes, with 7 in each in the ACC, Pac-12, and SEC, and 6 in the Big Ten. This is preposterous. This kind of turnover is insane, man.
Yeah, it really is. I felt like I was just scrolling all of the Division I football teams. Like, when you were looking at this list of the new coordinators, it was like literally every team just scrolling. Although Georgia, I noticed, was not on here. And that's another team that's got a new defensive coordinator. Or this is just offensive coordinators, right?
No, Georgia's on there. I'm telling you, you didn't scroll enough. You got to go down. Georgia's on there.
Are they sorted with the offensive coordinator and then the defensive coordinator? Oh, that's what it is.
Yes.
Jeez, this is a ridiculous number.
This is what I'm saying. Like, you keep going and you're like, am I done? Nope, that's only the OCs. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is an insane list here. This is where we are. This is why we have to do something about the college football timeline, because like you tell every single recruit, don't commit to the coach, commit to the university. Like, okay, whatever. We know these guys are committing to coaches, and like, we know how much head coaches change, but these position coaches, like, that's who guys are like really committing to lots of times, because that's who's going to coach them directly. And these position coaches, like, these big time programs rarely have a position coach, I would say, for more than 2 or 3 years. Like, they're either a coordinator at that school or they've gone somewhere else to be a coordinator. It's just, no hate against these guys for, getting the best opportunity for themselves. But that's just why we had to do something about college football. So it's not just a wild, wild west, just ridiculous news cycle the entire 365 days a year.
I don't know, man. This is a lot. And if you're a casual football fan, you're out. Like, you can't keep up with all this. Like, if you're not doing a podcast, Matt Green, like you and myself, if you're not a college football junkie like us, you're going to be perplexed all this fall. You're going to be like, wait, who? He's there now? Wait, where is he? Like that, there is going to be an unending game of where is this guy? It's like the Charles Barkley NBA on TNT game where it's like who he play for. That's what's going to happen in college football. But it's like the players, the coaches, just everything. It's like who is this like that's where they ended up. Like Gene Chiswick's just going to be roaming the sidelines for North Carolina this fall on defense, and you're like, what is he doing? And you're like, oh right, see that's what I'm saying. You forgot that happened.
That's a good call, Gene Chiswick. I totally forgot about that.
I don't know, but I am curious. Like, is there one name on offense that stands out to you, and is there one name on defense? Who do you think is the most interesting? Who is there a team? Is there a change?
You start. You go first.
I'll say on offense, I think the most interesting for me would probably be Lance Taylor at Louisville, because I think for folks that don't know, he's been a great running backs coach at Notre Dame for the last several years with Brian Kelly, and he's done great work. Notre Dame's been able to produce a lot of great talent in the backfield. And guess who Louisville just got? Tion Evans from Tennessee, who had a lot of success. So I think with Cunningham and Evans, I think Lance Taylor is going to put together a game plan and just a scheme for Louisville to get back on track with that offense. I think that stands out to me a lot.
One I like on offense is Mark Whipple.
Yeah,
at Nebraska, because Scott Frost is not dead yet, right? Like,
yeah.
So if we saw what he did at Pitt, and Pitt is just so not the team that's known for being top 5 in the country in points per game. Like, they were number 1 for most of the season, and I feel like you had to double take when you saw Pittsburgh up there averaging 48 points a game. Mm-hmm. So if he can do anything remotely close to that in Nebraska, like it doesn't feel like Nebraska is capable of getting away from like the triple option and having like this. Like they don't run that offense anymore, but they've got the same quarterback that they've all like that would run that offense forever. It feels like, you know what I mean? Mm. They just their quarterback is always a limited passer who can run around and make some plays. So if they can get away from that and actually have an explosive like passing offense, I'd be really interested to see how good Nebraska could be next year.
Let's also throw Texas Tech in the list, because Joe McGuire hired Zach Kitley from Western Kentucky, who just put on a clinic this past year with the Hilltoppers. So I think the run and gun, the air raid rather, and just that that's my gunshot here on the podcast. So I think the Red Raiders will be back to
Is that what stuff. That was?
That's what that was. I think on DC, I think what stands out to me the most is Ohio State and Oklahoma. And it's for one good, one bad. I think going from Kerry Coombs to Jim Knowles is huge. Like, I think Ohio State should be the favorite to win the national title next year. And part of that is Jim Knowles coming over from Oklahoma State. And that's just such a slam dunk hire and such a great move, because Oklahoma State has been a defense first team for years now. And he has done such a good job in Stillwater that I just love that fit and love him in Columbus. And then on the opposite side, like Ted Roof, he's been bad everywhere in Oklahoma, and Brent Venables, like, I'm sure he's going to call the defense and stuff, but that would scare me a bit if I'm an Oklahoma fan. Like, Ted Roof back at the Georgia Tech days and the Wake days and everything, but like, man, I don't know. Ted Roof was just a weird one for Oklahoma to go with.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma fans just kind of have a perception of exactly where they're going to finish every year. Mm. They might be in for a rude awakening this year. Like, they're not. I don't see them being the best team in the Big 12 this season. Like, I don't. And
might be some leaks in the roof.
It's just, and Venables is just such a question mark. Like, we have no idea how good of a head coach this guy is. But to your point, I like Jim Knowles from Oklahoma State, but also kind of touching on what we were previously talking about, Derek Mason. Now we've learned took a $400,000 pay cut.
Goodness gracious!
To go to Oklahoma State from Auburn. So
Derek Mason knew what was coming.
Right, exactly. So and for Oklahoma State as well, like to lose a big time defensive coordinator like that and be able to replace him with a Derek Mason, I think is pretty big, and it could go a long way in Oklahoma State potentially winning the Big 12 this year.
I mean, Baylor should be the favorite, I think, going into.
I think so. But they were, what, 2 inches away from winning the Big 12 this year? Like that 2-point conversion right there at the end.
Dave Aranda.
Or not 2-point conversion, the fourth and goal.
I also wouldn't rule out Auburn just being like, what, blank check to Dave Aranda if there's a move. Like, that's the slam dunk. Like, you're just like, hey, we're Auburn, and the big donors are just going to swing their big checkbooks, even though I think they're going to have to pay if they can't get Harsin out with cause. It's upwards of like $40 million in buyout money between Malzahn and Harsin. Like, it's preposterous.
I'm just not sure how much of a slam dunk Auburn is. Like, if you're a coach that's in a good position wherever you are, like Dave Aranda, Baylor is not a powerhouse. Like, Baylor, could you win a national championship at Baylor? I don't know. It's debatable. You could get to the college football playoff at Baylor.
Yes, you can. You can
definitely do that. And what's easier to get to the college football playoff, Baylor or Auburn? But Auburn is just this weird position of just where they sit with Georgia and Alabama and in the SEC West, and they don't shy away from scheduling big time non-conference games either. Their schedule every year is just kind of absurd. They have a fan base that, we don't know, not necessarily the fan base, but these donors, the big time people that pull the strings. That feels toxic, like from an outside perspective. So Auburn just might not be that attractive unless you just really want to get in the SEC, which some guys might. But Dave Aranda's one at the end of next season, if Auburn comes calling, like he's probably taking a serious consideration to that. But right here after the second National Signing Day, like a month before spring practice is going to start, like to jump ship and go to Auburn, like with everything they got going on, like I don't know how many guys would necessarily just jump ship to go to Auburn right now.
That's fair. That's
how many attractive coaches, at least.
That's why you do an interim. I mean, Kevin Steele is going to be the guy. I'm telling you, Kevin Steele is coming back. He just got the the Miami DC job, even though he just took the Maryland job and then he moved over to Miami. That man is just like, I'm going to get a check from every university in the United States of America. Kevin Steele's a legend, man. That dude got $1 million from the University of Tennessee for a month of just being around, theoretically. It was incredible. All that being said, now before we get into some South Carolina Gamecocks slander to wrap up on this podcast, where we do the full perspective for every SEC team as we hit this offseason running. Let's hit on your Georgia Bulldogs. Great news out of Athens this week. The Death Star has a chink in the armor a little bit. Is
that right?
I mean, your number one recruiter, the number one recruiter at the University of Georgia, pulled away by
the number one recruiter for the 2022 class. Like, yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah. So can I read this to you? Okay.
What's that?
From 247 Sports. I think this was, Dogs 247. Quote, in his first year since coming to Georgia from West Virginia, Addae, it's Addae, right?
Yeah.
Or is it Addae? Yeah, okay. Emerged as a strong recruiter, landing 3 5-stars and 2 4-stars as the primary recruiter of record. Addae was also the primary recruiter for 5-star cornerback Jaheim Singletary, 5-star edge Marvin Jones Jr., 5-star cornerback Dalen Everett, 4-star cornerback Julian Humphrey, and 4-star safety Ja'Cory Thomas. Just fantastic stuff across the board here.
Yeah, that's strong, man. He's a South Florida guy too, so Miami came calling.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of
a staff that Cristobal's putting together, man.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's kind of surprising to see a DB coach leave Georgia just to be the DB coach at a place like Miami. Like it doesn't even seem like a lateral move. Like it's clearly not as good of a program right now. It's like several steps down. Like if he went somewhere like an Oklahoma or Ohio State, it's a lateral move, but to each their own, right? Even a Florida, it seems more big time than Miami right now. I mean, that's debatable, I guess you could say, but regardless, Jamel Addae is definitely a good defensive backs coach. I think it's just with what Georgia's built, he was there for 1 year, right? This wasn't one of the original guys that Kirby had over. And Kirby's specialty is defensive backs. Like Will Muschamp, his specialty is basically defensive backs. So I feel like with you heard so many of these guys. I think it was either Singletary or Humphrey. One of those, Jamel Addae may have been the main recruiter, but you heard a lot of guys talk about Will Muschamp when they committed to Georgia too. So I think Georgia's in a good spot. They've talked about, I know I've heard, was it Marcus Woodson from Florida State and Zach Etheridge from Auburn as two potential replacements. I don't even think it's that big of a deal, honestly. I think if there was a position you would be like the most confident about replacing under Kirby Smart, it would probably be the defensive backs. So I think just the defensive side of the ball in general, Kirby seems to always kind of have a plan in place on where he wants to go next. So I don't know. I think it's obviously a great coach to lose, and like that South Florida area, like you want to always have guys who can recruit that area. But yeah, I was definitely surprised to see him go and not be like an actual DC job.
Yeah, well, it seems like it was just going home and just going to South Florida. He probably wouldn't have left for any other kind of position at this point, especially for another DB coach role. So we'll see what happens, but recruits seem pretty okay with Muschamp and Kirby. But it's more responsibility for your guy, Will Muschamp. Georgia fans have to feel weird about that, right? Like with just how ingrained Will Muschamp is in Athens now.
It's kind of funny because he's just spent so many years coaching against Georgia for just a variety of SEC teams, just from LSU, South Carolina, Florida, Auburn. But I don't. He was ours first though, right? So there's something cool about.
Now you're fighting over who gets to claim Will Muschamp.
It's something cool about Muschamp being part of like Kirby's national championship team and everything, because first and foremost, before Muschamp went on his journey, he was a Georgia Bulldog, and his son plays for the team now. So, and then Bobo coming to be an analyst, and his son is coming to play on the team. It's just a reunion happening in Athens. Good things.
Great, happy for you.
And Brian McClendon too. I don't know if that's happened since we last were on the podcast. I think that's a huge hire for Georgia. You talk about a big time recruiter, like some of Georgia's biggest recruits they got from 2011 to 2014 were because of Brian McClendon, from Chubb, Michelle, Gurley. Like it's a long list.
Yeah, I think Georgia will be fine. I think they'll be fine, but it will be interesting to see if they're able to keep matching these kind of recruiting classes in the secondary without him, because he was big time in his first year on the job. First recruiting cycle on the job, rather.
For sure. That was a ridiculous defensive back class that Georgia had with Starks. He's a number one athlete, but I mean, he's going to play safety. So it's basically the number one safety in the country. And
Malachi Starks.
Yeah. Malachi Starks and Singletary and Everett, 2 5-star corners, and Humphrey pretty highly ranked as well. So it's a loaded defensive back class they brought in.
Well, let's hit on the last thing. I forgot you added Texas A&M. You want to have a Jimbo conversation. Like you're chomping at the bit. You want to add some spice to this podcast, and you want to add. You're dying to give a Jimbo take.
Jimbo is my South Carolina. No, you hate South Carolina.
I really do. It's South Carolina. No. I just, to say, Matt, like I've circled Columbia on my calendar this fall. I can't wait to be there. I cannot wait to drop 50. I can't wait for the 50 burger being dropped in Columbia. I can't wait for the implosion and just the retreat from South Carolina fans and all the analysts too.
Happens.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens for sure. So we were talking about Georgia and Kirby Smart. He was by far the coach under the biggest microscope coming into the 2021 season, right? I mean, there's a few coaches out on the hot seat like Harbaugh or Scott Frost or guys like that. But from winning a national championship perspective, even more so than Lincoln Riley, which I always, Lincoln Riley is my South Carolina, actually. I'll take that back. But Kirby was under more scrutiny than anybody. And if you look at what he did in his first 4 years at Georgia, so with last year, sorry, let me run it back. You look at what he did his first 4 years at Georgia, finished unranked, finished 2nd, 7th, 4th, and then followed that up with finishing number 7 in 2020. And then he was under this massive amount of pressure, right? That's basically what I'm getting at. So Jimbo Fisher, he's coming into year 5 now. so far in his first 4 years, they finished ranked 16th, not ranked, 4th, and not ranked. So are we confident he's going to follow that up with a number 7 finish like Kirby did in year 5 and was under so much scrutiny for how well he recruited, but not being able to win a national championship, even though Georgia's finishing top 7 4 years in a row? Like, this is now time. Like, Jimbo Fisher, they just signed this number 1 class. Like, and I do kind of hate how people, like, once you sign the number 1 class, you have to win a national championship. Well, these guys are going to be freshmen. It doesn't make sense to just jump on that this class has to do it, right? Like, we should be looking 2-3 years from now on what they become. But this is year 5 of Jimbo Fisher. So it's not like this is his first recruiting class. Like, we're expecting them to become a powerhouse. But I'm just wondering, like, when does Jimbo Fisher become the most scrutinized coach in college football? Is he already there?
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, it's got to come. But, like, I think part of what he gets a break from and that Kirby doesn't get is that Curry was in the East. Like, it was just a little bit different. Like, Jimbo has the SEC West. It's like all college football fans understand what he's up against in the West with Bama. Like, for whatever reason, I think that helps things for a little bit. And also, this is the best state A&M's ever been in. Like, they have never in their history been this good and this loaded from top to bottom. So if you're an A&M fan, you're just like, this is amazing. Like, I don't care like the concerns about the Johnsons because, Max Johnson comes in and then his brother flips from where did he flip from? I think LSU.
I think so.
To join up with his brother in College Station. But, like, I think they want to let it play out for a little while longer because this is insane how they're recruiting. It's just you got to have your fingers crossed for a little bit while longer, but it's also just not the same program that Georgia is. It's not the same program that a lot of those old school blue bloods where it's like the expectations for years was like national titles. And like A&M, when they were in the Big 12, there was no expectation they were going to win a national title. It wasn't like that. So they're new to this big boy football. And I mean, what more do you want? Like, you're not getting anybody better than Jimbo in College Station. You're not getting anybody who's going to bring in this kind of recruiting class outside of Jimbo. Like, you're not like, this is the best you might be able to get for a long time. And this is kind of like the glory years. And you just keep your fingers crossed that it ultimately works out on offense and you get the right quarterback. And I mean, you just beat Bama when you had no business beating Alabama last year. But yeah, I don't know. I think I wouldn't say the seat's hot for him. I think maybe if they have a really down year where it's like 7-5 with this class or something based on the last couple, because like you said, you can't base it on this most recent one with a bunch of freshmen, but he has been recruiting at an elite level for several years now. So there's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. My concern would be like, hey, we got to figure out the quarterback stuff. We got to figure out the offense. The offense can't be like this in year 4, year 5. Like, this has got to get fixed. You're an offensive guy. Like, this is not okay. We're not doing this. Tennessee, Heupel had no players of his own. And like, just Tennessee's already a top 10 offense in college football. Like, you have the players. There's no excuse for us to be 41st or whatever in offensive efficiency. Like, you gotta clean that up, man. Like, this is not going to work for us. So outside of that, I don't know.
And to be fair, like, the people who thought that Kirby Smart's seat was anywhere remotely hot coming into last year are just like, you don't know what you're talking about. Because so many of those points you made right there you could easily apply to Georgia, right? It's like, yeah, we hadn't beaten Bama yet, but this is the best Georgia football has ever been. Like, yeah, he's got the same record Mark Richt had first 4 or 5 years, but we can all tell how much different it is, right? They were recruiting at such a more elite level, like putting more guys in the NFL, just doing a lot of things better. So I just want people to bring that same energy at Jimbo because
they're not going to, though. It's not happening.
Kirby was 44-12 through the first 4 years, and Jimbo's 34-14. There's probably 4 or 5 more games in there, because of the COVID year and the like last year's bowl game getting canceled. There's probably 3 or 4 more wins they could have in there just by games played. But so to be fair, this original point was at anyone who is saying either to begin with is just wrong because A&M is in a good position, right? Like they're not in a they're not in a position where they should think Jimbo Fisher needs to win us a championship, win the SEC West, or we're firing him. Like, that's just not going to happen. Like, they're in a good position, but I'm just trying to keep that same energy.
Okay. I mean, you're going to fight this effort. That's good. I'm happy for you, but I don't know if you're going to get a bunch of people to join in. I think he makes it easy when he complains and he's just like, I get what he's saying, like where he's backing his coaching staff, where he's like, we put in the work, because I'm sure they busted their tail on their recruiting trail. Like, I'm sure that's true, but it's also like, just own that it's a combination. Like, there's nuance here. It's not like we're saying that you didn't do anything all year and you just threw a bunch of NIL money at these kids, but like, also don't pretend that they're not. You can't have one without the other. That's just silly.
Yeah, it feels a little like that's the narrative, though, right? That it's the NIL money. That's the only reason you guys were getting these recruits. Like, so I can understand him being like a little. I was actually kind of more on Jimbo's side in that rant, because like Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban, like, talk about your own team. Like, keep my name out of your mouth, kind of thing. Like, don't worry about what we're doing. Like, you just worry about yourself. So this NIL thing is something that anyone can do. And you're at Alabama. You're not, this isn't Akron. You know, we're talking about, we're not talking about someone who can't compete on Texas A&M's level. They can't throw down money that Texas A&M is throwing down, or whatever they are doing. Like, and that was the best point I thought Jimbo Fisher made, was Nick Saban is bragging about Bryce Young making $1 million before he's ever played a game. Ohio State is showing that, you know, posting that they had the number one NIL earnings of 2021 or something among their players. So these people that want parity in college football, they say they want it until a new kid shows up like Texas A&M. They're like, oh, hold on, how did you get here? Who let you in? You know? And I can kind of understand Jimbo coming from that perspective, because everyone had the ability to utilize some NIL aspect to the recruiting process. I guarantee his coaches busted their tail to recruit this insane class. And you've seen like the guys they have on the staff, like James Coley. He was, you know, highly criticized for his 1 year as offensive coordinator for Georgia, but he's always been hyped up as a recruiter of the South Florida area. And so he's on the staff. Nick Williams, they got from Georgia's staff as a grad assistant. I don't know what exact position he's in now, but he's been hyped up as a big time recruiter. And A&M got three of the top like 10, 15 players, I think, out of the state of Georgia this year. Like, that's big time. A state that the in-state program pretty much locked down more than most of the big time states. So I can respect Jimbo getting defensive, but at the same time, to be like, NIL had nothing to do with it. Well, that's not true either. Like, I understood him getting defensive, because I feel like it is discounting what his coaches did, but at the same time, it's obviously part of the equation.
For sure. Well, let's wrap with the South Carolina Gamecocks, a state. The full perspective of the South Carolina Gamecocks, the co-coach of the year, the newcomer of the year, after getting drubbed by the other co-coach of the year in Knoxville, where I was there.
One go, huh?
It's the most ridiculous thing of all time. Like, I understand like the down the stretch stuff and winning the Mayo Bowl and all that great stuff, but it's like, if it came down to it, then you look at the head-to-head and you're just like, oh right, we can't give it to him, and we can't give them both co-coach of the year because one of them literally beat the living crap out of the other one on the field. So that is something that happened. But Spencer Rattler and a new tight end, they clean up in the portal a little bit. They don't have a 29-year-old under center next year, it looks like.
Their loss.
Yeah, their loss. Shout out to our guy Zeb. But look, man, they overachieved a little bit than what we thought, because we saw like 3 to 4 wins potentially for this South Carolina team.
I think so.
And then you look at 2022 Matt Green and you're like, oh, where are these wins coming? They don't even start off easy. Like, Georgia State's not going to be an easy game at home, but they'll probably win that one. Then they start with at Arkansas, Georgia at home, and you're like, oh man, like those are just 2 losses right out the bat. And then here's this stretch for you: at Kentucky, Texas A&M at home, Missouri for homecoming, and then they get Vanderbilt. That's nice. Their last 3 games are at Florida, Tennessee, and at Clemson. Where are the wins coming? Like, this looks like I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I have 7 for sure losses on this schedule. 7. I don't think they're going bowling. I think South Carolina has a worse record. You heard it here first, folks. I think South Carolina has a worse record next year than they did this past year. And I think, hey, they did some stuff this past year, and shout out to them for doing what they need to do. But hey, do we just forget that they got blanked by Clemson, a bad Clemson, a down Clemson team, 30-0?
That's what I was thinking. Just going through their 2021 results,
yeah.
like we remember that East Carolina game. Like, yeah, it might be a win in the win-loss column, but we saw what that team looked like for 3 quarters and had to pull that out at the very end. Like, beat Vanderbilt by 1 last year. Like, yeah, they went 7-6, but like, oh man, it could have easily been 4-8, 5-7.
Do you know what it is, Matt? I think it's all from the Florida game. I think that's all people remembered. Like, it was such a shock, and it had such a big ramification on Florida.
And Auburn too, because I felt like they beat Auburn before Auburn really collapsed too. Like that was probably part of the collapse, is probably because they lost to South Carolina, but I don't know. It was a strange year, and I think you're right though. Beating Florida and Auburn, like, that's sexy. You're South Carolina and you just beat Florida and Auburn in the same year. There's excitement for sure, and you won your bowl game, beat North Carolina in the bowl game, like, and your coach got doused with mayo. That's what this is really all about. He went viral. We all saw the mayo, and everyone just loves him for it. Everyone just loves Shane Beamer. That's what you're just gonna have to deal with.
And look, I like Shane Beamer. It's just, can we be honest about where South Carolina is as a program? Can we be honest about what this schedule looks like? Can we be honest about what's on the docket for them next year? And I just look at the schedule, man. Like, is it not a worse schedule than they just had? Like, count the losses. What do you see right now?
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's hard to count like the automatic losses. Like, I'm definitely saying Arkansas is a guaranteed loss.
Yeah.
So Arkansas and Georgia, A&M, just because they've never beaten A&M.
Yep.
I think that's a reasonable one. And then Tennessee and Clemson. I'm not saying Florida's an automatic loss, because I have no idea what to expect from Florida. But those
on the road,
those right there,
years,
I named 1, 2, 3. Yeah. I named 5 losses, I think, right off the bat.
That's what I'm saying.
Your best possible season is 7-5, and that's
beating Missouri and Kentucky, right?
Missouri is a swing game. That's Kentucky being a swing game. That's Florida being a swing game. So I don't know. That's obviously having to take care of some of these bad teams out of conference that have tripped up South Carolina too. So I think they are moving in the right direction. But I think you can't get past the co-coach of the year.
Well, it's also just that, like, where the wind's coming. It's like is Georgia Tech making progress? All right, look at the schedule. Is Vanderbilt going to be okay with Clark-Lee? Where are the winds coming? Like, they're going to be awful again. Like, he's going to drop. Like, it sounds so good when new coaches come in, where it's like, we're changing the culture, man. I love it when a coach comes in and he's like, we're changing the culture here at South Carolina. We're changing the culture here at Vanderbilt. We're bringing in Barton Simmons. Like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to develop 3 stars, and we're going to grind our way to some victories. We're going to Northwestern Nashville. That's what we're doing. And that's great. However, you're in the SEC, and the SEC is not friendly. Like, the SEC is very much the haves and the have-nots. And for better or for worse, the SEC East has always been defined for the last 30 years on 3 teams: the Tennessee Volunteers, the Georgia Bulldogs, and the Florida Gators. That's it. You have a blip in there with South Carolina, the one Stephen Garcia year. You have Mizzou that early.
It's not just a blip, though. It's like a period of time. South Carolina was a legit contender for like 4 or 5 years in a row there.
Contenders doing a lot of work there.
They won the East, and then the next 3 years they won 11 games. Like 3 straight 11-win seasons. Like, that was a legit success.
But it's an outlier for what South Carolina was.
Without a doubt.
And Kentucky.
And it's also the peak. Yeah, it's the peak of what they've ever been, really.
And that required some teams to be down. One of those teams that were down was Georgia. Georgia's not going anywhere. Georgia's there. Tennessee's on the up and up. Like, you're not going to score enough to beat Tennessee next year. That's not happening. And Florida, like, Napier's making some good.
Definitely down at that period too.
Yeah, and Florida might not be down for very long either. We'll see with Napier and what he puts. But like, if I have to bet on between Napier and Florida, Beamer and Carolina, and Drinkwitz and Mizzou, like I'm probably betting on Florida figuring it out over the 3. But you just look at it and you're like, where are the wins coming? Like you look at the counter, you got to play some SEC West teams that are all better than you. You've got to play Georgia. You got to play Tennessee. You got to play Clemson. That's unavoidable on the schedule every year. Clemson's a better program. It doesn't matter how much they're falling a little bit. They're still going to beat you. I don't know, man. Like it sounds good until you go 6-6, 7-5, 3 years in a row. And I think that's what's going to happen with Beamer is he's going to run into a wall where it's like the fans were energized early. You got some cool transfers. And then you were like, oh, wait, we still have to actually play these games on the field. And we're not going to get enough wins because the schedule doesn't permit it. Like if this South Carolina team was in the ACC, we'd all be like, wow, could they beat North Carolina this year? Could they be 10-2, 11-1? Like it's a different perspective. But in the SEC and playing a mixture of the SEC West and the East, I just don't see it. Like I don't buy the hype. Not buying it. Sorry, Gamecocks fans. But to be fair to our Gamecock listeners, I'm going to be just as hard on Kentucky, just as hard on Mizzou as I am on South Carolina fans. It's just they are the soup du jour at the moment, and that will change when games actually start happening this fall. That is my prediction. It's like it's going to get ugly this fall for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, I wonder. The things do seem good. There's a good tone around the program. But yeah, I think so much of it was about a down Auburn, a down Florida, and then winning the bowl game always. Like 6-6 turns into 7-6. That season just feels so much better. But like they weren't, because Tennessee was what, 7-5 and then lost the bowl game and finished 7-6.
8-4. We were 8-4.
You sure?
I'm giving us some wins. There, we can go back. We can relitigate. The
That was right, though, right? They finished 7-6.
Well, hold on. No. We're not counting the Purdue game as a loss. We're not doing that.
It was garbage. But I'm saying 7-5 losing the bowl game to go to 7-6 and 6-6 winning the bowl game to go 7-6. It's not the same thing. And so I feel like at the end of the day, it looks the same. And I think that's where all your hatred is coming from.
It's not hatred. It's just not real. Like it's not real. Like
your intensity.
Look at the numbers don't lie. Tennessee is in a much better place than South Carolina. Like we saw it on the field this past year without Heupel's players yet that were familiar with the scheme, and they drubbed South Carolina. Like this game was over midway through the second quarter, Matt. Like they are going to blow South Carolina off the map again. Tennessee owned South Carolina, even those good Stephen Garcia years. Remember when Crompton just like stomped on Spurrier and the Gamecocks in 2009? Like, no, this is
who doesn't remember that?
That was the who doesn't? I think that was the black jersey night actually. Back in the day, but yeah, I don't know.
Lane Kiffin year?
Yeah, it was the Lane Kiffin year.
Oh, okay. I remember. Oh, those were the worst black. Those are the worst black jerseys. If they can just come up with a black helmet next year, I'm on board with those.
They have them. It was literally a supply chain issue. Like they could not get them. Like
I know, but I'm saying they didn't wear them. But I'm saying if they're rocking the black helmet, I'll be on board with their black jerseys.
Well, I think they will this fall.
This year.
I think the Smoky Grays are coming back too, I've heard. So I'm here for both of those. Well, that's all I've got, Matt Green.
So where are you putting the over under? What, 6.5, 5.5?
I think 6 is about where I put it. Like I think 6, maybe 5.5. I might go 5.5.
So if I put it at 6.5,
I'm going under. Like
if I put it at 5.5,
I would consider the over.
You're going over? Okay.
I would consider it.
I could see that.
Yeah. But
I don't know. There's some swing games. We might not be giving enough credit to Spencer Rattler.
Okay.
Like, just because he got benched for Caleb Williams, that doesn't mean he's not still a good player. Like, I think we've all seen the videos of him in high school. You know, I think lot of people are just rooting against Spencer Rattler at the end of the day. You know, it's just his vibe, whatever it is. But that doesn't mean he's not good. And also the tight end that I'm forgetting his name that they brought.
Sternberger or something.
I was thinking Stalker, but I can't even.
Well, Luke Stalker What is his name?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's something like that. You know what I'm talking about. And then they already have a good tight end, one of the better tight ends in the SEC. So they could have some weapons. I think there's just a lot of people
Stogner,
There
Austin
you go.
Stogner.
Yeah, and he was a solid player for Oklahoma. But if Spencer Rattler could come in and actually be the second or third best quarterback in the SEC, South Carolina does have a chance to win eight or more games. Like, who knows? But I don't know. It remains to be seen.
We'll see. Matt Green, we
give
can follow you.
A little bit of positivity there for the Gamecock fans at the end.
Thank you for that. I'm sure they appreciate it, Matt. Well, don't forget, you can find Matt on Twitter at Matt_W_Green. Follow myself at Chase_Thomas. But every week, full ride here on this podcast feed. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel if you've not already done so. YouTube, Chase Thomas Podcast. Subscribe, like, all that good stuff. John Taylor coming on after this here on this edition of the podcast. But Matt, always a pleasure, my friend. Enjoyed the UNG looks and the shout out to Maddox before we got started. Our unofficial
shout out to
mascot.
Zeus as well, sir. Okay.
Shout out to Zeus
and Khaleesi the dog.
Khaleesi the dog. She is somewhere, probably eating some food. That's what she does. Big eater, Khaleesi. Matt Green, always a pleasure, my friend, and I will talk to you next week.
Yes.